social dimensions of Reconstruction.
My name is Abraham Lincoln. Today we are going to compare and contrast presidential reconstruction. My hat! Compare and contrast presidential reconstruction with congressional reconstruction, including the significance of Lincoln's assassination. I'm getting assassinated? And Johnson's impeachment. Oh, wow, I was not expecting
After the Civil War brought with it the monumental task of physically, politically, economically, and socially repairing the United States. Questions exist over how to most efficiently and effectively make this happen. There were two different approaches to I have no thumbs. Two. There were two different approaches to Reconstruction. Presidential Reconstruction was the approach that promoted more leniency towards the South regarding plans for readmission to the Union. Congressional Reconstruction, on the other hand, blamed the South and wanted retribution for causing the Civil War. Their approach required much more submission from the South as a condition for importance of rebuilding all aspects of the nation, where the deferred was in the details for implementation.
Much of the southern United States was destroyed during the Civil War. Farms and plantations were burned down and the crops destroyed. Also, many people had killed their money, which is now worthless, and the local governments were in disarray. The South needed to be rebuilt. The rebuilding of the South after the Civil War was called Reconstruction. The Reconstruction lasted from 1865 to 1877. The purpose of the Reconstruction was to help the South become part of the Union again. Federal troops occupied much of the South during Reconstruction to ensure that laws were being followed and that another uprising did not occur. Now let's talk about whether to punish the South or not. Many people wanted the South to be punished for trying to leave the Union. Other people, however, wanted to forgive the South and let the healing of the nation begin. Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction. Abraham Lincoln wanted to be lenient to the South and make it easy for Southern states to rejoin the Union. He said that any Southerner who took an oath to the Union would be given a pardon. He also said that if 10% of the voters in the state supported the Union, then the state could be readmitted. Under Lincoln's plan, any state that was readmitted must make slavery illegal as part of their constitution. Yay, Lincoln! Woo! Dead part.
Lincoln was shot and killed on April 14, 1865.
Nowhere it has in the theater! After the assassination of Lincoln, the Reconstruction task fell to me and Drew Johnson. Yes, my plan for Reconstruction was actually similar to Lincoln's. That's why I was great. The new president I sought to rapidly appoint governors who would make the required political changes. There was significant opposition to this approach by radical Republican members of the Congress, like me. Yes, who wanted the South to be dealt with more harshly.
Well, they should. Us! We elected! The election of us of 1866 returned a radical Republican majority to us, the Congress. The group began pushing forward bills that favored their position, and Johnson vetoed each one. So quickly escalated to a level not previously tested. In addition to vetoing Republican legislation that came to the White House for Johnson's signature, the president was also following many new Republican
blind guide.
In March 1865, Congress created the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands in order to ease freed slaves' transition from enslavement to freedom. The Bureau is often referred to simply as the Freedmen's Bureau. In addition to supporting former slaves and beginning their new lives, the Bureau was also intended to help the vast numbers of homeless whites who had been displaced or lost their property during the war. The federal government was operating as a relief agency with overseeing the social welfare of the nation's citizens. In addition to assisting with the basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, and medical assistance, the Freedmen's Bureau was also responsible for introducing a system of free labor, overseeing approximately 3,000 schools for freed persons, settling disputes and enforcing contracts between the typically white landowners and their black labor force, and securing justice for blacks in state courts. The Bureau also worked to reunite families and legalize the marriages of former slaves.
The greatest areas of success attributed to the Freedmen's Bureau is the basic education provided to approximately 200,000 blacks. During slavery, it was illegal in most southern states to teach slaves to read and write. White Southerners were worried the literate slaves would be better able to communicate, to plan rebellion, or to read newspapers reporting on the abolitionist efforts. Once the Civil War was over, it was essential that former slaves develop basic reading and math skills in order to not be taken advantage of when negotiating work contracts with white landowners. While the Freedmen's Bureau did help some former slaves acquire land unclaimed by its pre-war owners, Congress did not grant land or the absolute right to own land to all freed slaves. Such land grants would have provided blacks some level of economic independence. Without it, and with few skills outside of farming, the newly freed slaves had few options other than entering the sharecropping, crop, lien, or tenant farming system, where they often ended up working for former slaveholders in conditions very similar to slavery.
Most of these people helped by the Freedmen's Bureau were black. However, some white Southerners also received ration assistance for food and clothing. There is some evidence in the detailed records kept by Freedmen's Bureau that some American Indians drew rations from the agency. The records document some Cherokee and Creek tribal members on the ration rolls. As in the case of land grants, the Bureau lacked any enforcement authority on its own and lost its remaining ability to carry out its mission when federal troops were withdrawn from the South. Excuse me. The lack of adequate funding restricted the number of agents working in the South. A Freedmen's Bureau agent was often the only Northern government representative in a former Confederate community. The agent was often harassed and threatened. Most white Southerners refused to support the Bureau's objectives when Northern politicians neglected to give it financial support, thus causing its demise. The Freedmen's Bureau closed operations in 1872.
Now, we are going to describe the significance of 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Yay!
Yeah. All right.
The significance of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And let's see. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are collectively referred to as Reconstruction Amendments, and they effectively end slavery, extended citizenship, and allow voting for rights for former male slaves. These amendments are significant because they establish a federal mandate concerning the end of slavery in the United States. Even with these amendments to the United States Constitution, many states in the South passed black codes or Jim Crow laws that restricted blacks and denied their true
The amendment was
equality.
adopted in 1865 and is a very direct concerning the end of slavery in the United States. The amendment reads, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convinced shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their justification. Because the amendment ended slavery, it made no provisions for slavery within the original Constitution. The overturned policies include a fugitive slave clause requiring runaway slaves to be returned to their owners, and the Three-Fifths Compromise concerning the count of slaves as part of the state's population for representation in the Congress.
Hold on, my 15th Amendment was adopted in 1868 and is a little more complex than the 13th Amendment, which bans slavery. There are two main provisions in the amendment. First, it declares that all people are born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. As a Reconstruction Amendment, this provision meant the former slaves were indeed citizens of the United States. The second provision of the 14th Amendment requires that the states protect the rights of all United States citizens. States are expected to provide equal protection of the laws and due process of law. This particular amendment is still often used by civil rights activists to defend against discrimination.
15th Amendment was adopted in 1869. The text of this amendment is also very brief. The amendment reads, the right of citizens of the United States to vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The second section adds, the Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. The 15th Amendment did little to limit the effects of poll taxes, grandfather clause, literacy, test implemented in southern states to block blacks from voting after Reconstruction ended.
Can you see the word? Oh, okay. So now we are going to explain the Black Codes, the Ku Klux Klan, and other forms of resistance to racial equality during Reconstruction.
Hi, I'm Shirley McShuckshus, and in the South, resistance to Reconstruction took several forms. Many white Southern citizens refused to participate in political positions in the outcome of the Civil War. Southern states passed harsh laws that restricted the economic and political rights of free men. Racial equality was not fully achieved during Reconstruction. Black codes were enacted by many Southern states immediately after the Civil War. These state-level laws were designed to regulate relations between white Southerners and new freed slaves. While recognizing some rights such as legalized marriage, ownership of property, and limited access to the courts, Black codes denied blacks the right to testify against the whites, to serve on juries or in the state militias, to vote and take part in legal customer publicly. Also, the codes were an attempt by a plantation rule system to relinquish some black laws as a result of the 13th Amendment requiring all blacks to provide proof of employment or be forced to work for white men only. Black codes embraced northern Southerners and the public who saw rise as a reintroduction of slavery. The Ku Klux Klan was founded in 1866. The Ku Klux Klan was founded in 1866. It was originally a Confederate veterans club, but quickly became an organization closely associated with the worst forms of violence and intimidation. Initially, the Klan chose to scare blacks into compliance and keep them from voting. When this method did not work, Klan members attacked on the whites who came south. The racist organization also targeted Southern whites who tried to support Reconstruction and blacks who were educated but participate in community affairs. Eventually, anyone Klan members disliked could be attacked, beaten, or brutally murdered, often in front of family members. Resistance to the Klan was difficult due to a lack of weapons among blacks and control of court system by the KKK sympathizers. Some states, notably Arkansas, Tennessee, and Texas, successfully broke up the Klan with special police forces. Eventually, the federal government used the Enforcement Act to break up Klan activities. By 1872, Klan violence had greatly lessened, and some Southern leaders urged the Klan to step down because federal troops would stay in the South as long as blacks needed protection from society. The Ku Klux Klan reemerged in earnest after Reconstruction ended, and the federal soldiers were no longer in the South to provide protection.
Is this the last one? This is the last one? Yay! Okay, well, let's get on to it then. For this one, we are going to analyze how the presidential election of 1876 marked the end of Reconstruction. The period of Reconstruction has a definite beginning and a definite end. The efforts of the federal government to direct the rebuilding of the physical, social, and economical features of the United States began at the conclusion of the Civil War and ended with Rutherford B. Hayes' election to the presidency in 1876. Without federal government oversight, racial equality was not protected in the South. Political and economic factors contributed to the federal government's abandonment of Reconstruction. By the mid-1870s, there had been a change in state-level politics in the South. The white Southerners who had refrained from voting and participating in government began to reclaim their position of dominance in state-level politics. Until this point, black Republicans had many elected positions in southern state legislatures following the Civil War. The Reconstruction Amendments had guaranteed citizenship and voting rights for former slaves. The federal government military occupation of the South during the period of Reconstruction began 1865 and 1877 had helped to guarantee the safety of blacks, allowed them to safely vote in many states. The result was the election of approximately 2,000 black candidates to state, local, and even United States Senate positions. In fact, South Carolina's majority slave population before the Civil War meant that the former slaves who exercised the right to vote in the state after the war had tremendous power. This was especially true since white voters across the South were refusing to participate in the election as a form of protest over their loss in the Civil War. The political power of black Republicans in the South was brief and came to an end with the 1877 end of Reconstruction. The election of 1876, the Democrats nominated Samuel J. Tilden and the Republicans nominated Rutherford B. Hayes to be their candidates. The campaign was a bitter one. Ooh, salty. Tilden won the popular vote by 260,000 votes, but failed to carry a majority of the Electoral College votes. The electoral votes in 4 states, Florida, Louisiana, Oregon, and South Carolina, were disputed. A special federal commission was appointed to sort out the Electoral College dispute. The commission awarded the Republican Hayes the election along straight party lines. Democrats in Congress threatened to filibuster the vote.
You know how our relationship wasn't really that great in the beginning?
Who could forget that?
When you try your best until you succeed.
Take that, Saka.